A single plant once protected entire villages from starvation, out-yielded the potato and needed no replanting, yet the world erased its harvest. Forever method. Almost overnight. Was this a forgotten mistake or a deliberate choice to reshape our food system? The story begins where indigenous knowledge meets a European crisis, and it exposes why this crop was buried. Sunchoke patches were not the work of accident or chance. Across riverbanks, meadows, and woodland edges from the Atlantic coast to the Great Plains, indigenous families established these living reserves as a deliberate answer to hunger. Once planted, a patch could persist for decades, sometimes longer, without ever needing to be sown again. At the height of summer, stalks towered 8 to 10 feet above the ground, their yellow blooms marking the hidden network below. Underground clusters of knobbly tubers spread outward, each one capable of surviving winter cold that would kill most crops. Harvest was a careful act. Digging tools loosened the soil at the margins, lifting only what was needed for the season. The largest tubers were taken for food, while smaller ones and those near the central stems remained undisturbed, guaranteeing the patch would rebound the next year. Some patches grew just steps from village homes, others marked trails or campsites used for generations. In times of plenty, they offered variety and abundance. In years of crop failure or game scarcity, they stood as quiet insurance against famine. The logic was simple but profound. Let the earth hold the surplus. Tubers left in the ground stayed fresh through the coldest months, ready to be dug at need. There was no annual ploughing, no dependency on outside seed, no risk of total loss from a single failed harvest. Stewardship passed from one generation to the next, with knowledge encoded in stories, protocols, and seasonal rhythms. Each patch was both a food source and a living trust, managed with restraint and foresight. This was not wild gathering. It was a system built for survival, rooted in respect for the land and the certainty that hard years would come. In the summer of 1605, Samuel de Champlain arrived on the Atlantic coast of North America, joining an Algonquian feast where he encountered a root unlike any he had seen in Europe. He tasted the tuber, noting its flavor was remarkably close to the artichokes prized in French kitchens. Champlain observed that these roots were not wild finds, but cultivated, grown deliberately in cleared patches alongside beans and squashes. The communities he visited managed these crops with intention, expanding their gardens year by year by clearing trees and letting the land recover between plantings. Impressed by the taste and the resilience of the crop, Champlain collected samples and arranged for tubers to be shipped back to France. The arrival of this new plant in French soil came at a moment of deep vulnerability, because repeated crop failures and food shortages had left much of the population at the edge of hunger. French gardeners quickly adopted the tuber, now called topinambur, a name borrowed from the Tupinamba people of Brazil, whose arrival in Europe happened to coincide with the plant's introduction. Within a few decades, the sunroot was growing in kitchen gardens and botanical plots across France. Herbalists and apothecaries recorded its artichoke-like taste and its ability to thrive in poor soils. The tuber's reputation spread quickly among those searching for reliable food in an uncertain climate. Unlike most crops, it could be left in the ground through winter, dug as needed, and would return year after year, no new seed required. The promise was clear: a plant that could feed people through hard times without dependence on annual planting or outside markets. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, agricultural experiment stations began publishing yields figures that drew sharp attention. Station bulletins from the Midwest and Pacific Northwest recorded sunchoke harvests that rivaled or surpassed the best commercial potatoes. A 1980s Oregon trial reported nearly 64,000 pounds of sunchokes per acre without irrigation. For comparison, the same region's potatoes, grown with irrigation, topped out at 53,000 pounds per acre. University of Minnesota field tests in the 1970s and 1980s found sunchokes averaging 30,000 pounds per acre, while potatoes reached 20,000. Caloric analyses followed. Sunchoke patches left to propagate themselves produced 30,000 calories per acre, half again as much as potatoes, with no need for annual seed or fertilizer. These numbers were not theoretical. Station records tracked actual harvest weights, tuber counts, and acre-by-acre comparisons. Extension agents noted that even in poor soils and dry years, sunchokes rebounded, while annual crops failed or needed costly rescue. The implications unsettled the emerging agricultural economy. Here was a crop that could flood local markets with calories and animal feed, all from a single planting. Seed companies and landowners, whose profits depended on annual purchases and predictable cycles, saw a problem. A plant that multiplied itself, resisted eradication, and delivered bumper harvests without buying anything new. The data spoke for itself. Yields could destabilize the business of farming as a market, not just as a way to feed people. For those invested in recurring sales, the sunchoke's abundance was not a promise, but a threat. Potatoes fit the new machinery and market rules in ways sunchokes never could. By the late 18th century, European farmers and merchants favored crops that could be sorted, counted, and stored for months in warehouse cellars. The potatoes' smooth, uniform tubers, stacked neatly in crates, resisted bruising and kept through winter with little spoilage. Sunchokes, in contrast, produced knobbly, irregular roots that clung stubbornly to the earth and spoiled quickly once dug. Their thin skins and branching shapes made cleaning and peeling labor intensive, a poor match for the sorting lines and bulk storage that defined industrial food systems. As steam-powered diggers and conveyor belts replaced hand tools, potatoes slid easily into the new machines. Sunchokes tangled in the gears, left fragments behind, and scattered across fields. Each missed piece would sprout again, defying efforts to clear a field and rotate to another crop. Extension bulletins and farm journals began to warn of sunchoke escapes, describing them as a nuisance that invaded cereal fields and resisted eradication. The plant's very resilience, once its strength, became a liability in the eyes of estate managers and seed merchants. Market logic followed suit. Potatoes could be bought as certified seed each spring, their varieties named and controlled, their trade taxed and tracked. Sunchokes, multiplying underground with no need for new seed, offered no such revenue stream. Merchants and landowners labeled them pig food, suitable only for feeding animals or desperate times. In rural North America, the plant's spread was met with suspicion and hostility. Settlers and agricultural officials called it a weed, warning that it would overrun gardens and spoil the value of cleared land. By the dawn of the 20th century, sunchoke patches survived mainly at the margins, in neglected corners, on poor soils, or as a last resort when other crops failed. The system had no place for a harvest that could not be counted, taxed, or easily controlled. In the winter of 1916, German cities ran out of bread and potatoes. The naval blockade had cut off imports, and fields yielded only turnips and animal fodder. In backyards and on neglected land, families dug for anything edible. Jerusalem artichoke patches, forgotten by authorities, became a lifeline. Tubers hidden under frozen soil were overlooked by ration boards and requisition squads. During the occupation of France from 1940 to 1944, official rations dwindled to a fraction of what was needed. 80% of food was seized for the German war effort. Cookbooks and ration guides from the period list topinambur and rutabaga as daily fare. Families who once scorned these roots now relied on them for survival. In the Dutch hunger winter of 1944, with famine closing in, people clawed at frozen fields for any remaining tubers. Emergency pamphlets listed Jerusalem artichokes as one of the last foods left when bread and potatoes had vanished. Each time, the perennial patches fed those who remembered where to dig. Modern nutrition tables confirm what centuries of survival have hinted. Sunchokes are densely packed with energy and nutrients. Each 100 grams delivers 73 calories, 2 grams of protein, and more potassium than a banana, alongside iron, copper, magnesium, and B vitamins. The real distinction lies beneath the skin. Over half the tuber by weight is inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria and slows sugar absorption. In the 1980s, clinicians observed that some diabetic patients who ate sunchokes regularly needed less insulin. That finding drew new attention to this neglected crop. Unlike the starch in potatoes or wheat, inulin does not spike blood sugar. Field studies show sunchokes thrive with 1/3 of the water required by corn, while their deep roots heal soil and resist drought. Agroecologists now point to these traits as essential for future harvests, especially as climate extremes become the new normal. Today, millions face food insecurity as climate extremes threaten fragile harvests, yet a self-renewing, nutrient-rich crop waits in the margins, erased not by biology but by economics. The question now is not if we could harvest forever, but whether we will choose resilience over convenience before the next crisis arrives.